And now the director of SunSeed-The Journey and today's moderator, Mr. Amertat Cohn.
Hello everyone, and welcome. I'm so pleased to be the host of SunSeed Wisdom Talk number 1. This is the first of a series of interactive discussions inspired by SunSeed and its legacy. I filmed the original movie SunSeed in 1970. And the new movie, SunSeed-The Journey, was just released a few months ago. If you haven't yet seen SunSeed-The Journey, you're in for a treat. And you can find our movie on our website at www.sunseed.org. If you've already seen the movie, I'd love it if you would leave us a little yes or a heart or a comment, if you like, in the chat here tonight. And don't forget to register and sign up on our mailing list so that we can notify you of our next in the Wisdom Talk series and other exciting events that are coming up. Before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping things, just to give to the audience a heads up. First, we're going to have about an hour of discussion with our fantastic guests that we have tonight. And then we're going to be able to take some of your questions. So, as we go along, if you want to write your questions in the chat, we'll try to get to all your questions. And then we have some private time with each of our guests, finishing with some spiritual practices that they're going to share with us. Today, we are so fortunate to have with us two incredible beings. Before we jump in, I want to just say heads up and hi to Pir Shabda Kahn and Mirabai Starr, our two invited guests for today. Pir Shabda Kahn is a spiritual director of the Sufi Ruhaniyat International, which is really the legacy of Murshid Samuel Lewis, who we affectionately have called Sufi Sam. You've seen him in the movie if you saw the movie. Pir Shabda is always in demand. He's a demanded lecturer, spiritual guide. He leads camps and retreats all around the world. And he's also an avid student of music. He's an accomplished musician, photographer, singer of Indian ragas, and much more. And our other guest, Mirabai Starr, is an amazing, amazing spiritual leader, a mother of four, a well-known lecturer and author and translator of great books. She was recognized this year by Watkins Magazine as one of the top 100 most spiritually influential living people. And in fact, she's actually in the magazine as in the top 20. So we're so honored to have you here, Mirabai. And most of all, she's a lovely, lovely human being. Hello, Shabda, welcome. Hello, Mirabai, welcome. We're going to start, Mirabai, with you. We'd love you to share with us your journey from seeker and follower to arriving at the role you have today as a world-renowned teacher and thought leader. What was your journey like? Share with us.
Yeah, that's a daunting introduction, but I'm just going to ignore it, and I'll do my best to just say what some of the steps along the path were, because I think that they dovetail with Pir Shabda's, and also perhaps with yours, Amertat, but definitely with Pir Shabda's. That my journey began at Lama Foundation, and I know that isn't where yours began, Shabda, but it was definitely part of your journey, and it continues to be part of your journey. So I grew up in the counterculture of the 1970s. So my parents uprooted us from suburban Long Island, New York, non-religious, kind of anti-religious Jews from New York, and we went on an odyssey, as many counterculture families were doing at that time in the very early 70s, and ended up in northern New Mexico, in Taos, New Mexico, where I still live and have raised my own family. And Taos is in proximity to Lama Foundation, where Murshid Sam uh, lived, and not lived, but spent a lot of time and taught and chose to be buried, and is in fact buried, and where Ram Dass created Be Here Now. And both Murshid Sam and Ram Dass figure prominently in the film Sunseed, and they were both my earliest and most profound and enduring influences, both of them having a similar message of the unity and the diversity of the world's wisdom traditions. So being so young, when I was exposed to all of this, and then moving to Lama Foundation on my own from Taos, just an hour away, when I was 14, my spiritual formation happened around this whole vision of the unity of all the world's great spiritual traditions, that all is one, as Maharaji Neem Karoli Baba, Ram Dass's guru and mine, said, Sub Ek, all is one. Or as Murshid said, that Lama Foundation, where I was so profoundly influenced, is a meeting of the ways, as is this particular flavor of Sufism. So I then, I ended up studying, doing a master's degree in world religions, in religious studies, with a focus on the mystics, and then began translating the Christian mystics in my 30s, which was kind of unexpected, given that I was a Jew with a Hindu guru and a very deeply devoted or dedicated Buddhist meditation practice, Theravadan Buddhist meditation practice, Vipassana, and had taken initiation in 3 different Sufi orders, and lived in Taos, New Mexico, which is steeped in the culture of the Pueblo people, the native people, the indigenous people of this Rio Grande Valley where I live. Everything but Christianity. In fact, I grew up with a kind of suspicion about Christianity, but I fell in love with the Christian mystics. And I will wrap it up here. I fell in love with the Christian mystics through this resonance with Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi. Rumi's poetry, which I was exposed to before Coleman Barks or Robert Bly or any of those other translators, made him so accessible. I studied Rumi as a Sufi teacher in my teens, and he enkindled my heart, as he has for so many of us. So that by the time I was 20 and living in Spain studying Spanish literature, and encountered San Juan de la Cruz, St. John of the Cross, he felt to me like the Rumi of Spain. And so my delving into the mystical poetry of St. John of the Cross led me to a career in translating the Spanish mystics, including St. Teresa of Avila. And but it all began with Lama and Murshid and Ram Dass awakening my heart to the essential unity, that wellspring of love that all the wisdom streams flow from and flow back into. And so it's not like I left some particular Judeo-Christian tradition to become this kind of universalist. It's the way I was made at Lama.
It's so interesting that your background and your family. I don't know if you said your family were atheists, but they certainly had no affinity to the different spiritual paths. And then you left at 14. You jumped into it. And what was the first, let's say, moment that you realized that you were not just a follower, but could actually be able to teach other people?
Yeah. I wouldn't presume to be a spiritual teacher. In fact, your lovely producer Marcus tried to put that on my, lower third there, and I wouldn't let him, because I guess I have to say that first, that the whole, with all respect to those of you like you, Pir Shabda, who are in fact an ordained leader in your particular lineage, I feel like I have a pathless path, or a lineageless lineage, even though I draw from many. that mine is more of a sort of feminine, relational, non-hierarchical space that I inhabit. And so what I guess I found is that in the wake of my first 3 translations of John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila, I began to be invited to speak and teach. I had already been a classroom teacher my whole life since my early teens. And so I was very at home in the role of conveying and distilling to, I hope, its essence, many different wisdom teachings. And as a translator, I feel like my task has been to translate in much the way that Ramdas did, although I'm sure not as skillfully, but translate the essence of these Dharma teachings, these wisdom teachings from these different traditions into a readily accessible, heart-centered, poetic and authentic language that people could connect to. And so I feel like as a teacher, that's what I do. I translate these wisdom teachings in an accessible way that I hope brings people into the field of the heart and beyond the discursive mind, although often we'll use language to bounce off of, to go to that place that transcends language and is love.
You know, we'll talk about it in a little bit later, but I mean, what you're saying is like almost a modern step beyond following a narrow path and moving it out to a more universal position. I really appreciate you sharing that. Pir Shabda, we first met at a Sufi camp in 1969 with Pir Vilayat. Of course, we remember that very well. Can you share with us your journey from then, because you were a disciple and a follower, and today you're a great inspiring teacher. Can you discuss your journey?
Thank you, and greetings and salutations to all the beings around the world who are joining us and making community, and I'm holding hands with you all in the best way I can. And even though we're missing the physical contact during this time on our planet, we're finding ways of bringing the world closer together. So I'm so happy to be here with you. And
thank you for being here, Shabda. Thank you.
And same with Mirabai. So happy to be with Mirabai. I loved her qualifications as a non-spiritual teacher. I'm going to aim for those qualifications so I can also be a non-spiritual teacher. Similar, very similar path, but a decade earlier, product of the 60s, also in New York, also a Jewish family. My parents were German Jewish refugees. My first teacher, like some of you, was psychedelics and extraordinary experiences through that. And then I was sitting in my apartment, listening on the radio, and in 1968, Baba Ram Dass had just returned from India. He had formerly been Richard Alpert, and he spoke for 2 hours on listener-sponsored radio, WBAI in New York, KPFA out here in California. And he talked all about his LSD journeys, because he was a researcher in that. And I related to what he had said so much. And then he said, I went to India and he met my guru and he met his guru and so on. And that was by the time he was done with his talk, I said, that's my teacher. And I went and found him. I found him in New York, and he gave me a set of beads, a mala, and he said, say this mantra on it. And I'll meet you July 5th or something like that at my father's home in Franklin, New Hampshire, and we'll start a community together. And so that was in the fall of 1968. During that period, I got out of the draft. I dropped out of college, gave away all my things, and then I had time, and all the spiritual teachers of the day would come to the same place to teach. It was a Unitarian church in New York City, I think on the West End by the park, and so I met Pir Shabda Kahn there, and he invited me out to this camp that you and I met at, Amertat, and there was maybe 35 of us there, and 20 of them were, which included you, were Murshid Samuel Lewis's disciples. And the Dances of Universal Peace had been born a few months earlier, and I was so extraordinarily moved by that after the camp, I flew out to San Francisco, met Murshid Samuel Lewis, stayed with you and your wife at the time, and then I returned to Franklin, New Hampshire, and started my life as a yogi. I was on silence for 4 months. I'd gotten skinny as a rail, fasting and yoga and so on and so forth. But as soon as that, I thought I'd be there forever until I was awakened, and that was super naive, which I was. And it only lasted for 4 months. By September or October, it became too cold to be in Franklin, New Hampshire, the northern part of our country, and it disbanded. And so there it was. Got a Volkswagen bus and went across the country, stopping at Lama Foundation, 1969, meeting Asha and all the people who were there, and arrived at Murshid Sam's door and became his disciple. And that really set the umbrella of my life. That Hazrat Inayat Khan, Murshid Samuel Lewis, their teachings, their Hazrat Inayat Khan was Murshid Samuel Lewis's teacher. And sorry, I'm going on so long. It's hard to put a journey in a 2 minutes, but Hazrat Inayat Khan was the first Sufi master to come to the West in 1910. He was also the first Indian classical musician to come to America, and he brought a message that was completely universal, that was not only the universality of religious ideals, but the universality of human ideals, and encouraged so had an esoteric message of practices and traditional Sufi practices that could carry one into this condition of limitless freedom, but then also wanted the world to understand that this was the message of the day. And then that was carried forth again by our teacher, Amertat Murshid Samuel Lewis, who brought the Dances of Universal Peace, which anyone practicing those knows right away that there is a universal message. I went from there. After Murshid Samuel Lewis died, I met a great Indian classical musician named Pandit Pranath. He was in the same Sufi lineage we were, but I didn't even know that. But I became his disciple, and then I studied 24 years under his care and guidance. I remember saying to him that I'm already the disciple of Murshid. He said, "That's fine. We can work together." And then we've always had the care of Murshid Sam's very close friend, Joe Miller. Joe and Gwen Miller, really, he and his wife were resident saints in San Francisco, and they guided us all along until their death in the 90s.
Joe has a great moment in the movie at the end, in the funeral there of Murshid Sam. It's just a memorable moment. He was so powerful.
Yeah, and so he was in my life, but living in my life for 30, 40 years. So what a great honor and pleasure. And then last, in the early 80s, both my wife and I became disciples of an extraordinary Tibetan master, His Holiness the 12th Taisitu Rinpoche, and we've had so many deep adventures with him, and so much guidance in my life. And there you have it. Married, I've been married 45 years, and so on. A couple grandchildren.
You know, your experiences and Mirabai's experiences are really quite similar in the sense that you've encompassed and incorporated in your own life these quite different traditions, but with the common thread. And, you know, SunSeed, the movie, and SunSeed, the journey, really had the same elements in it. The central theme of the original movie SunSeed, which is in SunSeed, the journey as well, is there are many paths to the one. And now, 50 years later, how has the world changed? I think I'll start, Mirabai, with you. Because you talk about the meeting of the ways, the different threads that come together. How, in your view, does SunSeed, the journey, speak to the current generation and generations? And did the spiritual teachers who we followed, you think that what was started brought about a real transformation in thinking today, or we still have a long way to go?
Mm-hmm. Yes and yes. I think it's both are true. So, you know, many of the people come into my sphere. You know, I'm in kind of a spiritual bubble. You know, I mostly speak to privileged white people of different generations. Thankfully, there's more and more diversity of people being drawn to my work. I think especially as I enter the realm of the women mystics and feminine mysticism, it's reaching a more diverse audience. But people that I speak to and hang out with are mostly on a serious spiritual journey that, whether they know it or not, was influenced by the people in your film. Like all the people that you gathered all those years ago that you recognized to be these wisdom leaders who were transforming the consciousness of an entire generation were and did. And that a lot of the younger people who don't even necessarily know all those wisdom teachers have been able to engage deeply on a spiritual path because of them. So what I'm noticing about the emerging consciousness of spiritual seekers, especially younger people, millennials and a little older, is that the line, let's see, how do I say this? The lines between contemplative life or cultivating an inner life and being of service in the world are blurred. It's not like one or the other. It's not like you're a political activist or you're a meditator. One gives rise to the other in a much more organic way than I think it did back then, even though many young people were engaged in the anti-war movement and wanted to alleviate suffering in the world. There was more of an inner focus and more of an individual quest for enlightenment. As Pir Shabda mentioned earlier, we had this naive idea, I too, that we were all going to wake up and be liberated, and who knows what that was going to look like. But I think now there's much more of a hunger to be of service to the human community and to Mother Earth herself. But I also believe that we couldn't, that consciousness, that more integrated awareness and the awareness of privilege, of white privilege, of misogyny that's inherent in all of the religious traditions, all of that actually is the fruit that came from the seeds planted by our teachers, all those years ago. So I'm not sure if I'm addressing your question. Okay, I guess the last thing I want to say is that the other line that's blurred, I've noticed for this emerging circle of seekers that I've been in contact with, is the line between the isolated religious traditions, the institutionalized, organized religions. Doesn't really make sense to the younger people who are on fire for spiritual experience, but wary of institutionalized religion. And so there's this thing that's happening that Murshid Sam so beautifully lived, especially through the dances of universal peace, where they are drawing from the wisdom stream, various wisdom streams, these younger people, but not in a superficial way, not as from the consumerist culture. I mean, that's happening too, but there's a lot of depth in looking to these different wisdom traditions for the authentic, life-giving treasures that lie at the heart of all of them, and no problem dispensing with the aspects of religion and religiosity that are divisive and separate us and encourage us to otherize. They have no patience for that. So I have deep reverence for this emerging generation of spiritual seekers.
Well, you've written a lot about the inner spiritual quest and how that might be a little bit different than the interfaith or the same as the interfaith movement. And you're very active in trying to bring together many different belief systems, as is Shabda. Before I get to Shabda, just how do you see your role, Mirabai, in furthering that dialogue, and do you think it's important that we pursue that, and how is it changing today? You said how it's changing because the young people have a little difference, but
yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question. So just quickly, the difference that I see, and Shabda, I'd be curious to see if this resonates for you, between interfaith and interspiritual is that the interfaith movement, which I think has been for at least a century an important peacemaking activity in community, in the global community, is about representatives of each of the faith traditions coming together around the proverbial table and sharing what is most beautiful about each of their traditions, also sharing, openly, vulnerably what is problematic in each of their traditions, listening with great respect, and building tolerance. That's been the interfaith movement. Interspirituality, which is a problematic term, but we don't seem to have a better one right now, maybe some of you do, is much more about experience, moving beyond an intellectual orientation to each of the faith traditions and entering in, like Ram Dass says, getting yourself wet. Don't be afraid to get wet. Like entering into those wisdom streams, immersing yourself, and having an experience that is potentially a transformational experience in a tradition that is maybe unfamiliar or different, and allowing it to change your heart. So that's an interspiritual path. What I am finding is that, yes, it's still vitally important for me to affirm those of us who are temperamentally inclined to recognize the presence of the sacred wherever we encounter it, in all of these holy houses, all these sacred spaces. And the difference in how I felt about this 10 years ago when I wrote God of Love, for instance, and how I feel about it now is that it's vitally, urgently important that we enter these sacred spaces with respect and reverence for those cultural traditions that we are interfacing with, so that we aren't just those of us who are privileged white people from the United States or Europe, aren't just blithely helping ourselves to the treasures, to the cultural treasures of other peoples without proper permission, respect, attribution as we do so. And at the same time, not being afraid to follow the promptings of our hearts that say, yes, there is truth. There is truth. There is truth. There's love here. There's love here. There's love here. It all makes for more love. But to not do so naively without regard to very real issues of privilege and power and race and culture.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for that. Pir Shabda, I know you've got a lot to say about this. You're part of interfaith efforts. I know it's very important in your life, the Peace Pledge group, which I'm not exactly sure. Maybe you can talk about that and how you see the coming together and the work to bring us more together from our diversity to unity.
Yeah, thank you. And that was so eloquent, Mirabai. Thank you so much. And it reminded me, I think, just to add a little humor, when Murshid Sam was alive and he was speaking to us, he said to us, he says that talking about experience, that is. He says the trouble with the church today, he says, if you believe in angels, you're in. But if you see them, you're out. Interfaith, we as a humanity right now are, I don't know if under attack is the right word, but we're having to deal with a pandemic. And naturally, as a mystic or as a human, we should always ask the question, what is that here to teach us? Aside from using wisdom to do our best to save lives and relieve suffering. And one of the things that's extraordinary about this pandemic is that it doesn't know any boundaries. It doesn't know boundaries of race. It doesn't know boundaries of wealth. It doesn't know boundaries of religion. It doesn't know boundaries of countries and so on. And so that might be one of the greatest lessons that we could pay attention to. Can we approach our life that way, that all life is sacred? And as Mirabai hinted at, not just human life, but all life, all the life that's visible to us and all the life that's invisible to us. From the Sufi side, or mysticism side, mysticism is based on experience, not on philosophy teachings. This is an old 11th century master that Murshid Samuel Lewis used to quote all the time, Imam al-Ghazali. Sufism is based on experience, not on premise. So that's from the wisdom side and from the mysticism side. I've had so many experiences of interfaith that showed how important they were when I was so fed up with it. One time we were at a Sufi symposium where Sufi leaders, this is about 20 years ago, from around the world had come together. And a very fundamentalist sheikh, I think from Kuwait or Saudi, or had come to us, and he was ranting at the women what they should be doing and how they should be covering, and I wanted to basically I want to take my clothes off and run around naked or something. It's not just, it was so revolting. And I went to our organizer, a wonderful woman, Sufi master, and I said to her, how could you bring someone like this into our symposium? And she said, I understand what you're saying, but you have no idea how much he had to move and change his point of view to be with us. Mm-hmm. And so I learned from that. And that happened again. I think it was 2003. I was on an interfaith peace pilgrimage to Syria. And we were up in the mountains at an old monastery called Der Mar Musa. It had been a monastery in the 10th century and had been revived by a Jesuit priest. And we were having an interfaith dialogue with head of the Armenian Coptic Church was there, and Shia imams and Sufi masters and so on. Wasn't totally interfaith, but for that area it was. And we were talking about peace in Israel, and the Shia imam said, he said, I used to live in my apartment building when I was a child. There were Jewish people on this side and Christian people here, and we all got along. We played together as kids. But since the Zionists came, no, Israel's got to go. It's no good. It has to go. There's no place for it. And that was that. And we kept trying to say, that we understand what you're saying, but that just won't work. You have to find a way to coexist and to find a dialogue and so on. And he had nothing to do with it. And it was very disappointing. I remember feeling great disappointment. And a week later, we were back in Damascus, and he ran the mosque and the shrine of a young woman named Ruqayya. A beautiful, beautiful shrine. And I had been there and prayed there and sang zikr there. And so he invited us there, and we were standing in the courtyard, and he arrived, and the first thing he said to us was, I haven't stopped thinking about what we talked about.
Wow.
And so I felt the meaning of interfaith. We have to get to know each other. We've got to see we're human beings. And certainly many people come from the position that I believe in there's only one God, and my God is the best. And we have to gradually move that there is nothing but God, that we, even the thought of self is an adapted notion. And so I find great value and meaning in interfaith. And it's also, we as spiritual leaders or religious leaders, when we stand on a podium with other religious leaders of other faiths, we're demonstrating to our followers at least to be tolerant. And I heard Mirabai say that, where interfaith builds tolerance. So that's just some reflections. You had asked about, I am in a group called the Peace Pledge Pilgrimage, and we took religious leaders, and finally we realized that's not enough. And then there were, obviously, when we started with religious leaders, there were too many men, and then we started balancing out men and women. And then we realized, oh no, we need, then scientists joined us, and then educators joined us, and then politicians joined us. And so to show the universality through all of these threads. And then I think one of the most dramatic things we did is we went together as a group of spiritual, religious, scientific, educational, political leaders to Greenland to bear witness to the devastation of the polar ice cap and the threat to human life and life in general by human action. And we went from there to Assisi as a group and had a big gathering there to try to show not only universality, but that loving kindness and compassion from human beings would be the source of changing the condition of our world today.
Well, the very existence of the human race as we know it is in question. And I think Mirabai mentioned a little bit, you're mentioning it, how the yoga and mindfulness communities are becoming more and more aware and active in this awareness. So maybe you could both speak a little bit of how you see the greater mindfulness community can help create solutions for climate change, the depletion of the Earth's resources, and basically what we can do now to try to make a difference. Shabda, you want to start because you were already going in that direction.
Yeah. Thank you. And it's a very important question, and I feel it's again part of the message of this virus that's arising for me. And I would put forth a couple of words and then kind of center around them. There's a principle called coherence. Could be called resonance. It's similar to what's called entrainment, very much what's called cooperation. So in a sense, from the virus side, it's clear that the scientists in general are cooperating, not based on gender, not based on wealth, and not based on country or political views. They're cooperating to help humanity. So that sense of cooperation. But there is a principle called coherence, a scientific principle that's extraordinary. And it's been demonstrated, when Maharishi Mahesh Yogi was around, and they took meditators, and they took, let's say, they wanted to take 10% of the population of a certain area, and everybody would meditate every day, and they said they could reduce the crime rate by some extraordinary amount in a very crime-ridden place, and it worked. And so there's a principle that when it's called the 100th monkey in the old story. When there's enough of coherence, it can change, make a dramatic change, a paradigm shift. And we learned this from our scientists who were with us in Greenland. They'd been working on water scientists, and they'd been able to stabilize water in the what's called coherent water. And if I could describe coherent water, if you imagine H2O molecules dancing, and they're all dancing the same dance, or not the same, but a dance that's like synchronized swimming, so they're all in harmony together. And they've demonstrated clearly that if you put coherent water next to incoherent water, the coherent water organizes the incoherent water. And so I believe, as I remember our teacher, Amertat Mershid Samuel Lewis, writing that the New Age wouldn't bring anything new in the sense of the inner condition of awakening, but more and more people would have the divine experience. And so I believe we're coming into that period where there will be enough of us that we can become coherent together and make a shift around us. And so that's what I'm feeling. Thanks so much for that question.
Mirabai, how can we all help?
That was beautiful, Shabda. We can help by falling in love.
Wow.
My friend Dina Miriam, the head of, what is she, the head of the Women's Peace Initiative, Global Women's Peace Initiative, right? Yeah, she says it's difficult to rise up and do something for the earth unless you see the earth as a beloved being that you can't help but fall in love with. And then once you've fallen in love, then of course you will do everything in your power to alleviate her suffering. And so I think that is, whatever ways we can awaken that love, enkindle that heart connection with the planet itself, recognizing her, as St. Francis of Assisi so beautifully said, as our sister, Mother Earth. That's what he said, our sister, Mother Earth. And in many ways, I feel like this is a feminine kind of shift in the psyche of humanity, or in the collective soul, that we recognize the earth as our beloved mother and treat her as such, as traditional cultures have for millennia. So we need to look, I think, to indigenous sisters and brothers to see how they have cultivated that heart connection with the earth, and find a way to emulate that.
That's so beautiful.
Thank you.
So beautiful. And it just to add to it, we need to take care of Mother Earth. We need to have a relationship with Mother Earth. She's taking care of us. It'd be wrong to say it the other way. But if I sit in my backyard and I have my all the plants and the birds and the animals around, I feel the plants are living beings, and I communicate with them. And so now that, like you said, once I've made a relationship that I see the earth is a living being, and the parts of the earth are living, that I have a relationship with, then naturally I'll take care of them. And so I think that that is the most beautiful way to view it, to make a relationship with love, to the living beings that surround us, earth, water, fire, and air included.
Yes.
Really, to get back to loving is, as you say, I think is really the key. I spent some time with Jane Goodall, and you can see when she speaks, it's all out of love for every creature on this planet. Let's change gears a little bit. Mirabai, you've written about the mystics. We've talked a little bit about it. You've translated Saint John of the Cross and Saint Teresa of Avila. Can you tell us a little bit about the passion of the mystic and how that influences your own life and your own path?
Mhm. Well, I already mentioned that I fell in love with San Juan de la Cruz, St. John of the Cross, through Rumi, because they resonated so much, and Rumi already had my heart. And I would say that I really connected with a lot of the women mystics, especially Teresa of Avila, through my namesake, Mirabai. Ram Dass gave me the name Mirabai when I was 14, and I was given that name because I was in this school that I mentioned that was run by Lama Foundation, but was in Taos, that was an alternative school where all the great spiritual teachers of the time came through, and that just seemed normal to me. And there was a point at which a couple of Neem Karoli Baba devotees, who happened to be our drama and music teachers, had returned from India, and they came back with a comic book, you know, those Indian comic books of the stories of the lives of the deities and the saints. And it was the story of Mirabai. I still have it here, the comic book. And the kids wrote this. I don't know if you knew about this, Shabda, if you remember that from those days. We wrote a musical about the life of Mirabai, because we kind of took it on the road and we performed it a lot. And we wrote all the music, although we used some traditional bhajans from India, and the dance. We choreographed the dance, and we wrote all the lines. And I was cast as Mirabai, and we did the premiere at Lama Foundation in the big, large adobe geodesic, well, more or less geodesic dome at Lama, the iconic structure. It was quite an extraordinary experience. But right before we opened the play, my boyfriend died, my first love. So I was 14 years old. I just turned 14. Philip, he was killed in a gun accident here in Taos, and I was shattered. And there's something about that shattering, that shattered space. When I entered that dome dressed as Mirabai in Sharda's wedding sari, I felt that I was emptied. I was hollow, and she came through with this fire, this like fire of bhakti yoga, of the yoga of devotion, of passion, of longing, love longing for Krishna, the God of love. And that awakened my heart with this fire of longing that continued to burn in every aspect of my life, and really set me on my spiritual path, so that it wasn't just a play that I was in, which is why Ram Dass gave me the name a year later, because he recognized that passion in me, and I began to really delve into the poetry of Mirabai. In fact, I still have a fantasy of learning enough Hindi to be able to translate her. But that opened the door for me to all these great women mystics of multiple traditions. Rabia, in the Sufi tradition, the 9th century Sufi poet, and Lala, who was a Kashmiri poet, and Teresa of Avila, and all the host of Christian mystic women who also experienced this fire of love longing that itself became the portal, or the opening into a state of union with the beloved. So that's really infused every aspect of my own path and my work, as a translator and teacher.
Oh, thank you for that. I'll come back to you in a minute. I'd love to hear a great Ram Dass story that you might give us. But first, I want to just jump over to Pir Shabda a moment, because you're a Sufi, and the Sufis are considered by some to be the mystical expression of Islam. How would you define a mystic and a Sufi?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Mysticism is the birthright of being human. It's every cell of every living being has the thirst for freedom on it. We wake up every morning with it. We wake up with there's something that's calling us. We don't know what it is. Maybe we could say it's the path of happiness, to be happy, but those are placeholder words. And so to me, Sufism is pure mysticism. It's not a brand name. It has no founder. We can't say where it began, but it's that thread of passing on from person to person, not only that inspiration to awaken by example, but also to show how. And so Sufism in every country in this world is different, and it should be suited to the people that it's with. So for us, from my training with Hazrat Inayat Khan, Murshid Samuel Lewis, Sufism, you could say someone who breathes well, someone who breathes well, someone who's awakened love. The word Sufi didn't arise till the 10th century, even though Prophet Muhammad and Islam began 7th century. And even the historians don't know the root. There's many guesses. They say the first guess, Sophia, wisdom, from the Greek, Safa, purity, from the Arabic, Suf, which was from the Persian, which is a rough wool that you would imagine St. Francis would have worn, but the mystics wore. And Ain al-Sof, the people of the bench, the people who came to Medina. So you could say the Sufis are the people who are on sofas, but from the name. But it's mysticism, and Sufism based on experience, not premise. So what does that mean? In another way, it's like saying, okay, what kind of car do you drive? The Toyota, are you in the Toyota religion, or is the car just the vehicle to take you to your destination and you get out of the car? Freedom isn't owned by a car, by a vehicle. And so we think of Sufism as awakening, not as a vehicle. What was the other question?
What is a Sufi? What is a mystic? I think, you touched upon them, but.
Yeah. The quest for freedom, for awakening, and for what it looks like, simple, if you look at it, or as you begin, it looks very narcissistic. I want to awaken. But if you include the recognition that as you awaken, you're deconstructing that notion of self, of selfish, and you become selfless, or you become the grand self. And so that grand self includes everything. And so if I think about my physical body, I want my organs to cooperate with one another. I want my heart to have a good relationship with my liver, and my so on and so forth. And if they don't, I don't have good health. And so when you say, I see all beings as self, as myself, or when if I asked you the question, if I asked all of you to think about the question, where's the altar of God? And then you might all say, well, it's everywhere. But if you said that, then that might be the way we feel, but we want our experience to live up to that, so that when we see the mean person, the horrible person, the murderer, the rapist, or the beautiful person, or the flower, or the food chain, so we see it all as part of one being. So in that way, awakening, when you awaken for the benefit of all sentient beings in all realms, because that goodwill of loving kindness and compassion is for all beings, because you are experiencing yourself as the whole world. If I were to tell you, I take care of my hand, you'd say, well, but big deal, it's part of you. And so it's like that. It's for all sentient beings, because all sentient beings are my body.
A great explanation from a mystic about the mystic experience.
Well, we're students, like all of you. And I had said so. Hazrat and Khan said so beautifully. When you approach the horizon recedes. So where we might enjoy our current condition, we're still, like Mirabai said earlier, we're still thirsty. We're hungry. We want to grow more. We want to grow more.
Well, we've got a lot of hungry people out there asking questions, but I've still got a couple more questions, but at least this one, Mirabai, which is really important for our time. As you know, the consciousness and roles of women have changed radically over the 50 years since I made the original film SunSeed. And there are many women in the communities in the film who have become powerful voices in the spiritual world, the cultural world, the ecological community. How has this evolved for you, Mirabai, from when you were first at Lama and now today, the role of women and especially within this spiritual context world, and what do you see the future holds?
In 2.5 minutes? Okay, go, Mirabai.
Oh, you got more than 2.5 minutes, 3.5. 4.
Thank you for asking that question. It would be really, it would be the elephant in the room, and if you hadn't identified it. So all my teachers pretty much have been men, great iconic teachers like Ram Dass, like Murshid Sam, and Amertat Cohn and Pir Shabda Kahn, and Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi and Thomas Keating and many others. And the men the spiritual teachers I have read all these years and largely taught have been men. And so it's only been in the last 10 years that I've made a concerted effort really to find the voices of women across the spiritual traditions that I so deeply adore, and discovered that they were really successfully, and I believe intentionally, hidden and marginalized and silenced. And so it's been this kind of archaeology project, spiritual archaeology project, to excavate them and lift up those treasures. I mean, they are there, but it takes a lot of effort, and I feel like that's shifting. And I feel like women, men, and people of all genders and no gender identification are longing for the voice of the feminine, for feminine wisdom now. And yeah. And so some women, this is the difference between now and when you made the film Amertat, is that many women have now been ordained in their respective lineages as rabbis, as acharyas, as roshis and lamas and priests. And that's wonderful. But in many ways, they have to sort of recapitulate the very structures that have historically oppressed them in order to attain their position. And they work hard for that. But there's this whole other emerging circle, I would call it, of women who aren't actually interested in being ordained in those traditional ways, and have a much more relational, egalitarian view of spiritual community. And there's no map for that. And so we're kind of building it as we go. And it's very much an interspiritual community, I would say, but it doesn't jettison the important, beautiful teachings of all the world's religious traditions and some kind of new age, pulp. It draws deeply on the wisdom of those traditions, but through the feminine lens, and with rooted in feminine values. And I'm talking about women, men, everybody here, feminine values of loving kindness and fierce truth telling and creativity and sensuality and connectedness to the earth and each other. And these are the driving energies of this sort of mystical feminism that I'm experiencing now.
Yeah,
So,
I want to advocate for Mirabai, and she's such a beautiful voice for what's being called forth, not only in her writings, but as a speaker and as someone who looks in the heart as a way to express without making somebody wrong today. But all of us wish this, but it's more difficult being in what appears like a man's body to advocate for feminine wisdom or for the voice of women. Let's not say feminine wisdom, because I can advocate for that, but for women to have a real voice. And so, and I just want to give a plug to my wife, who is on that same ray, and written an extraordinary book called Untold: A History of the Wives of Prophet Muhammad.
I have it right here in front of me, behind my computer. It's an incredible book.
Oh, that's great. So when I read that, these women came alive for me, and I saw that, well, we've all played with the word his story, and we didn't get her story because the writers were all men, and so now her story is coming out. Many people are working on that, and it's an amazing time. The paradigm shift will continue to happen. I remember I was leading the Urs celebration of Hazrat Inayat Khan. That means the day of his passing. We celebrate it every year on February 5th. I think this was 2010 or 2007, maybe 2007. We had a large group of people there. There were hundreds of people there, and my co-leader was Murshida Taj Inayat, one of the great women teachers of the day. And she and I had agreed that we wanted her to be the one to give the first words to say, welcome everyone, and here we are, to try to shift the paradigm. That was our genuine wish. And we got to the shrine, and we all filled the shrine, and the Qawwalis sang, and then they handed the microphone to her, and she started to speak, and there were hundreds of people, so 300, 400 people. The microphone, the electrical system went down. Finally, she was just talking like this. No one could hear what she was saying. And then she was done. It was my turn to sing a raga concert. I sat down. The minute I sat down, the sound system worked.
Wow.
And it was just an example of how hard it is to shift a paradigm. I don't think there was any, it wasn't a plot by anyone. It just was the universe still saying, okay, you have to work harder if you want this paradigm to shift. So let's work on it, all of us together, and do our best to not make a whole bunch of devils out of everybody else, but work together and hold hands and change the way this planet works.
Well, thank you both, for all these memorable insights. We'll have more coming, of course, right now. But Pir Shabda, that's Taj, right? You were talking about.
She's in the film, like you said.
She's one of the 3 women in the film who actually speaks. And yeah, so.
And for me, she's one of the great women masters or great women teachers of the day. And the sound of her heart when she offers teachings is so deep and profound and unlike any other. And so very happy to invoke her, and how great that she is in the film. And now we'd have to have SunSeed revisit it and have her speak again.
Exactly. Well, we are actually in the process of formulating a sequel. So more will come. If you get on our mailing list, we'll keep you all informed about that. But I remember she said that talking about going through the door of my heart and leaving myself behind was the quote she actually talked about in the movie. But now let's take some questions from our audience. I know they're anxious to have their questions answered. And let's see. I guess the first question is from actually a dear friend of mine, Diana Gilbert. How would you perceive answering nothing matters? How would you perceive answering nothing matters? So whoever wants to jump in.
Go ahead, Mirabai. I'm happy to speak, but go ahead.
I'll just be brief because I don't have a lot to say except that I think I was an existentialist first before I was even on a spiritual path, in that I kind of glimpsed early on, maybe because I had a lot of death in my young life, that none of it actually really matters. But behind that what the existentialists call that nausea, or that emptiness, that despair, that angst, was a sense of, when you come to grips with none of it really matters, you have access to what really does matter, which is beyond all that. And I was just thinking about this morning, getting ready for this gathering, and asking to just be made hollow so that whatever needed to come through would come. And right in that, this is like a Zen koan that you're asking, friend. But right in that was this sense of, there's nothing to worry about because none of it really matters. But it wasn't like, oh, who cares? It's just Amertat's little movie. It wasn't that kind of nothing matters. It was, nothing you have to say is going to shift the axis of the earth. And all you can do is invite people into the landscape of the heart, where transformation may or may not happen. And that gives me this lightness with which I can walk through the world. So it's very easy for me to go to that place of, it doesn't really matter. That's very familiar to me and feels like a very rich place to abide. So thank you for that insightful question, that koan.
Great.
Yeah. If I'm in pain, it'd be hard or if someone's in pain, it'd be hard for me to say to them, oh, come on, get over it. Nothing matters.
No, you don't get to say that to them. We only get to say that ourselves. Very important distinction.
Oh yeah, I wasn't speaking as a response to what you had said. Not at all. Yeah, I felt you had included that, and so what I feel the root of it is that that essence of our being, whether you call it God, ocean, as Rumi said, we have to move from feeling like we're a drop in the ocean to we're the ocean in a drop. And so when you have the privilege of tasting the ocean, which is limitless freedom, then from there, coming and going doesn't stain the ocean. No virtue can exalt your soul, and no mistake can stain your soul. It's perfect as it is. And so it's an uncovering. And so from there, everything is perfect. No thing. There is no separate thing. It's interdependent. It isn't even the right word. It's one body. But if we're honest about our current condition, which is a limitation, then there's a movement, and we should be honest about that movement. We want to go toward the one. We aren't, even though we could make the affirmation, I am the one, that would be a little dishonest, because it's not our current experience. Our current experience still includes separation. So in honesty, I want to manifest loving kindness and compassion and care toward myself and to all beings in all realms, to relieve suffering and to encourage limitless freedom, which is the place where no thing matters, or everything is perfect, might be the turnaround. So that's how I'd like to characterize it.
I love to write down limitless freedom. That in itself is worth a meditation. Limitless freedom.
Your whole life, our whole life.
So now I guess we have a question from Blake Robertson. Thank you for your question, Diana. Thank you, Blake, for your question. How exactly do you define a mystic? And how does one reach such a state? And what does that entail? And he keeps going. Eternal gratitude for all the wisdom and love you all continue to share with us now. So again, the question, how exactly do you define a mystic, and how does one reach such a state, and what does that entail?
Thank you, Blake, for your question. And I think Pir Shabda really addressed it earlier, that and invoked Murshid Sam, that mysticism is about experience, direct experience. So the classical definition, the academic definition, is a mystic is one who has a direct experience of the sacred, unmediated through ordained representatives, priests, or whatever. Even prescribed rituals may open the door to the experience, but the experience itself transcends all forms and is a direct experience, usually characterized by love. And so if that's the definition, I think all of us, as Shabda said, it's our birthright. All of us have mystical experiences, sometimes on a daily basis, just encountering something of beauty. A bird drinking out of a fountain can momentarily suspend our sense of being an individual, separate self, separated from all that is. And actually, there's a moment of merging, with the one, and recognizing ourselves as being part of that one. So I think we experience it on a regular basis by virtue of being humans, especially humans with our hearts open to the wonder and awe of being alive. And yes, we can cultivate more access to those states of direct experience of love through the various technologies of all the world's great wisdom traditions that are engineered to invoke those unitive states of being, and mystical poetry will do it, and all the arts. It's why music can be so powerful, are all pathways, yogas, to arrive at that unitive state. Shabda?
Yeah, that was beautiful. On the question, how do we achieve that state? That's what surprise. That's what all the prophets came to show us. They became world religions, but they came with a message. Here's a way you can wake up. So you have to pick a gym practice and go to gym. Awakening isn't gym. It's everyday life. But don't underrate doing exercise to get good at your craft. So find a regular practice, and then let that practice infuse your everyday life. So you bring that emptiness, freedom, like Mirabai said, where the self is suspended when you see the bird drinking. That was so beautiful. So that the more and more moments of suspending of the selfish part of your being, but it's a gradual process. It's true that each of us can have experiences that lift us up very quickly, and we see from the top of the mountain, but then we come back to our station, and that station grows gradually. And so we want to apply ourselves every day. This goes from life to life to life. It's like when Murshid Sam spoke to us about it, he said it was like taking the ramp, going up slowly. We'll gradually change. And I think both Mirabai and myself and many of you on the call can speak to the fact that having applied ourselves day by day as ordinary human beings, the quality of our experience of life has improved dramatically, and our ability to overcome the thought of self and be loving and kind and useful, and to in the same sense that all of us as human beings have a natural sense of the wish to be benefit, because that's the nature of our being. Go to the gym.
I wrote down, Shabda, let practice infuse your everyday life. So key. So well said.
Oh, thank you. I didn't even realize I said that. Thank you.
So the next question is addressed to me. Amertat, can you say a little about what inspired you to rework Sunseed and any unavoidable pathways and doorways which appeared? Amertat, can you say a little bit about what inspired you to rework Sunseed and any unavoidable pathways and doorways which appeared? Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Well, what inspired me to actually, at first I just wanted to get the old film out, right? Because it didn't exist. It was in 16 millimeter. There were a few really bad copies of it floating around. And I just wanted to transfer the old film and get it out and be done with it. But as I looked at the world today, it's so different than it was in the 50s. I think you both have touched on it so beautifully, Mirabai. You started to get into how this new generation sort of has intuitively what we sought to find in a teacher, right? And Shabda, you said the same thing. You know, when I was with Lama Govinda in the movie, I said, "Can you give me a practice and a method of obtaining enlightenment?" He sort of twinkled at me and said, "Well, I think you better start with something a little simpler." Right. So, but that's, you know, and when I first met Ram Dass, I was drawn by the story of I guess you could say, the miracle of what this Nim Karoli Baba person was able to bring out in the world. So the world has changed. And when I thought of putting the old film out, I didn't think it would reach people. So I had to go inside Sierra to figure out what I could do to not to still give the essence of the old film and add something more to it. And that came about by meeting Ram Dass several times. He was the only person still alive from all the people that were in the film, except for us, Shabda, you and me, and thousands of other who are out there. And that's probably what the sequel will be about, us, right? But so Ram Dass he's a bookend in the movie, starts and ends it, brought some wisdom in. And then I realized that the original film had no narration. It was just an experience. But in today's world, I feel we wanted to communicate to people a little more what this was about and what the context of it was. And thank God Peter Coyote was there and helped write the narration that goes through the new version of the film now and really puts it into the context and brings out a little more of each of the scenes that are there. And of course, Sierra, yes, what's not there is us, the people that came from the movie Sunseed. What did this mean? What effect did this have on the world? I wanted to ask you two about that, because in a way I didn't get there in the movie. And so, yeah, that's something still to be explored. You know, it's the question everybody has. Well, it was great. And you hit it so well, Mirabai. You know, we're a group of privileged people. I mean, basically, who are the spiritual community has to take on another life to it. And I know Trudy, who's with Jack Cornfield, is very much involved in that dialogue as well. Many people are. And that's also not there, Sierra. We have to try to embrace a lot of different cultures who come from many different places on our planet and with totally different experiences if this is really going to be a universal message. I don't know if you both want to add something more, but yeah. Okay, next question. Nikki Lastreto, if I'm saying it right, please talk about the growth of goddess awareness today. Swami, I see. This is Nikki, who's with Swami Chaitanya. I don't think I pronounced it right. Chaitanya, who is my cameraman on the film SunSeed when we went to India. He's an old college buddy of mine from Wesleyan University. We were on the track team together, and he's changed totally. But Nikki, can you put the question up again that Nikki said? Please talk. Hi, Nikki and Swami. Please talk about the growth of goddess awareness today.
I think Mirabai will answer that.
From one goddess to another, right?
Thank you for the question. I often think when I hear questions like that of Reb Zalman's widow, Eve Ilsen, who, when she speaks about the Shekhinah, which is the indwelling feminine presence in Jewish mysticism, that the Shekhinah is not Mrs. God. So it's not like the goddess is the feminine alternative to the god. Or I think about Kali and Durga in the Hindu tradition. It's not like, they're just the goddess up against the god, or the consorts of the gods like Sita and Lakshmi and others. The goddess is God. So the goddess is God. And I think what people are recognizing is that the imbalance in the way we have been conditioned to relate to ultimate reality, which of course transcends all gender, is that the default paradigm is masculine. It has been that the world's religions were built by and for and to accommodate and reflect the experience of male people. And so by intentionally shifting our awareness, our language, our hearts toward a feminine expression of the great mystery, we are engaging in healing of our souls, and ultimately, I believe, healing of the earth. And so lo and behold, we find all of these goddesses across all of the great wisdom traditions kind of hidden in their heart. And we're looking to them now, not just women, but especially women, but people of all genders, to reflect something that has been missing from our collective heart experience. And the goddess represents love and compassion and mercy and kindness and all of those sweet attributes. And she also represents all of the fierce attributes of, cutting through illusion and speaking truth to power and unleashing wildness. And we're hungry for it. We're all hungry for her.
Wow. What a great answer. That was so beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much. Wow.
You so well expressed the hunger, with it. I'm pretty sure most of the people who are watching us and still have a hunger. And that's why we're so attuned to listening and feeling. I was warned that this hour and a half would go very fast. There's so many more things that we could explore, but now it's going to be time to turn our attention. Each of you have many more things to share with us and some practices. And we're going to start with Mirabai Starr. I know you're going to do some sort of a guided practice, and maybe you'll have some other wisdom to give us. It'll be totally up to you, but we're going to take a break. There's going to be like about a 2 to 4 minute intermission. So please, everybody, don't go away. The best is yet to come. And we're going to start with a guided practice meditation with Mirabai, and after that will be Shabda. So stay with us, and we're going to take a short break. And thank you all for your questions, and I can't thank you enough, Mirabai, Pir Shabda, but we'll thank you more at the end. So we're going to take a break now.
And now, Mirabai Starr.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Peaceful Sabbath to you. Today, here in real time, it's Saturday, which is the Sabbath in the mystical Jewish tradition. I mean, in Judaism, which is one of my several beloved root traditions. And the Sabbath in Judaism, as many of you know, is the holiest of all holy days, holier than the high holy days of the fall, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And it happens every week. When the sun sets on Friday until the sun sets on Saturday, we enter sacred time. We leave ordinary time. And we go into this kind of suspended, timeless place that isn't above it all. It's not like it transcends the earth or human experience. It's actually deeply rooted in human experience. It's like by virtue of the fact that we unplug or disengage from ordinary time and the concerns of our regular lives, we're able to actually abide in sacred space that's always available to us. But Shabbat is this kind of special invitation to lay down the burdens of our compulsions and our to-do lists and all of that, and allow ourselves to be in community, to be in communion with the earth, to turn inward. And so I am finding that in this time of this crisis, this COVID-19 pandemic, it's almost like collectively we're being invited, many of us, into a kind of Sabbath space where what used to feel important and used to even be possible, all those distractions, are taken away. And so we're kind of in this naked Sabbath-like space, potentially. So I wanted to kind of set that as the ground for an offering I'd like to make now, which is a prayer that I'm going to read to you. A Sabbath prayer that invokes the Shekhinah, who I mentioned earlier. The Shekhinah in Judaism is the indwelling feminine presence of the divine. And when we kindle the Sabbath candles on Friday at sunset, we are welcoming her and calling her in and saying yes to the indwelling feminine reality of the one as she lives in all of us. It's said that she lives in exile much of the time, except for on Shabbat, when the Shekhinah is welcomed home and is reunified with the divine masculine. So it's a day of supreme balance in the cosmos. I would like to suggest that one of the possibilities of this new time that we're entering might include the end of exile of the feminine, that the Shekhinah no longer needs to be separate the rest of the week and only welcome on Shabbat, but that she is part of our everyday experience of the sacred. So I'm going to light this candle. It's not a Shabbat candle, but in interspiritual fashion, I will light this beautiful candle that represents our collective experience of love. And I would like to read to you this prayer to the Shekhinah. This is from my new book, Wild Mercy. Wild Mercy. This is a prayer I wrote to invoke her as I began to write this book about women mystics across the spiritual traditions. And it has ended up being a prayer that has gone around the world in multiple forms, even put to music by a classical composer. And so I think it transcends, I certainly hope it transcends the limitations of one tradition and speaks to us all, or even any one gender, and speaks to us all. So I invite you to take a breath and either allow your eyes to close or just turn your gaze inward as I share this prayer as a contemplative practice Lectio Divina, sacred reading. And invite you to invite her, the Shekhinah, into your own soul today. O Shekhinah, yours is the feminine face of the holy, the luminous moon who lights up the night as we travel from captivity to liberation. The pillar of fire who guides our way home. The cloud hovering over the mountain peaks, living sign that the drought is over. You are the indwelling presence of the divine. Whenever we gather to praise the one, you are here in our midst. When we cry out for justice, you make our hearts tender. When we stand with those on the margins, you make our legs strong. When we create works of art and parent our children and harvest our gardens, you guide and sustain us. You are the Sabbath bride, the beloved, returned from exile. You restore balance to our relationships and wholeness to our fragmented souls. You infuse our lovemaking with honey. You fill the cup of our hearts, which tremble with longing, with the wine of your answering love. You are the song of our homecoming. You are the Sabbath queen, the great mother, who sits at the heart of the table, tearing off hunks of the secret bread that contains the exact flavor each of us loves best. You feed us all, the proud and the repentant, the believer and the skeptic, from your own hands. Your unconditional forgiveness dissolves otherness. O Shekhinah, we are the vessel for your inflowing. Your radiance requires the clay of our embodiment. Your flame burns at the core of the earth. Your warmth penetrates the seedbed and animates the seedlings. You bless the head of every animal and kiss the tear-streaked face of humanity. You are the vision that builds community, and you are our refuge when the fabric of community unravels. Be with us now as we navigate this landscape of mystery, where your most cherished attributes, wild mercy and boundless compassion, righteousness and wisdom, seem to be cast aside and trampled by imperious world powers, and we are paralyzed by helplessness. Help us. May we remember you and lift you up. May we recognize your face and celebrate your beauty in everything and everyone, everywhere, always. Amen. So just sit for 1 minute. I invite you to sit for 1 minute and allow that prayer to permeate every cell of your body, opening the way to the indwelling feminine presence of the divine who lives in you, who renders everything sacred, every landscape as holy ground. Thank you. Good Shabbos.
And now, Pir Shabda Kahn.
Welcome back, everyone. This is my beautiful wife of almost half a decade, to Mom. We want to sing a little bit together with you, but just to bring a little refreshment into the moment of our break, I'll tell you a Nasruddin story, one of my favorites. So in this story, Nasruddin, the master Nasruddin, he's at work when he's there with his colleague, and it's lunchtime, and they're having lunch. And he takes out his lunch, and he looks at it, and he's very disappointed. He goes, turkey sandwich, every day. It's a turkey sandwich. I'm so tired of these turkey sandwiches. And his colleague says to him, Hoja, master, it's simple. Just ask your wife, make you a different sandwich. And he goes, oh, no, you don't understand. I'm not married. I make my own sandwiches. So this is a period where we want to stop making the sandwiches we don't like as a humanity. And I love the suggestion Mirabai gave us of letting, inviting the Shekinah to be with us all week, which is very much like the influence of sheltering in place has been. And I think just to add a few notes into it, if you were born in Delhi and you're only 30 years old, you would say, this is the first time I've seen blue skies in New Delhi. The quality of the air, it's changed. So now that we, we were talking about Rumi earlier. Jalaluddin Rumi says, now that I've tasted the wine, give me the whole bottle or nothing at all. Or he says, enough of this metaphysics. I want burning. I want direct experience. So we've tasted some of what's possible as a humanity. And so I feel what's brought us together that might have more of a life going forward. But to spend our last few moments with you as community, to do practice, is to invoke music, and especially to honor Amertat, who made this extraordinarily beautiful film, SunSeed, which is a mark of history of that period of the late 60s, early 70s. And my teacher, Murshid Samuel Lewis, who brought the Dances of Universal Peace. This is probably the most well-known of all of the dances. It's called the Kalama dance, but we'll have to dance it in our hearts, and at least we can be singing it worldwide together. We sing La ilaha illallahu, which is a great sacred phrase that has its root in what we call Arabic. As mystics, we've been taught that sound has effect apart from meaning, so that the sounds themselves will have a transformative meaning, but the meaning itself is also glorious. It's negation and affirmation. The first part, La ilaha, it says, overcome your confusion of being some separate self. Illallahu, there is only one over all, part of the one, just like the organs of a body. And so we sing that to encourage the direct experience of unity or of union, of overcoming selfishness and becoming selfless. And then we sing Muhammadah Rasulullah. It goes like this. Muhammadah Rasulullah. So on the surface, it's saying the historical figure of Muhammad is the Rasul, the spokesperson of that all-pervading essence, the prophet of God. But if you understand it in another way, Muhammad refers to a condition of freedom, so that it's the voice of fullness or emptiness, which is speaking as the prophetic voice to help humanity arise. and be and fulfill its mission. So we're going to sing a little bit, and we invite you to sing with us. And naturally, you're in your room, you can sing really loud. On many Zoom calls, I've had people take out their instruments and play along. And one dear friend who's a concert violist, she was playing viola along with me on Zoom, though she was muted, but then later she sent me a recording of it, and it was beautiful. So let's sing together the Kalama. La, So I know many of you know this who are listening, and many of you who are listening have never heard this before. Just sing out. What do you say? You can fake it. There's an expression from Jalaluddin Rumi. He says, God accepts every form of currency, even counterfeit. So don't worry about getting it right. Come and join with us and sing with your heart and sing with devotion and full of feeling. La ilaha illallahu, la ilaha illallahu, la ilaha illallahu, Muhammadan Rasulullah, Muhammadan Rasulullah, la Amen, amen, amen. Gratitude to Amertat for making the film, for remaking it into what it is, SunSeed-The Journey, to a man you don't see who's helping us, Marcus, who's running this whole event, and to my dear sister and teacher, Mirabai. Thank you for being such a great wisdom being and for playing along in this sphere. And I really want to invite you to meditate on, or to reflect on coherence. Let's join our hearts together. Let's feel us working together to shift the paradigm so that life on this planet will be based on loving kindness and compassion and not on power and greed and jealousy and so on and so forth. Naturally, those are all parts of the human experience. Each of us, including myself, has all those parts in us, but we can transform them gradually. And if we work together, it will happen so much more beautifully and so much more easily. I'm sure it will happen. I'm sure this time is coming, whether it's our lifetime or the next or the next. Thank you all so much. And thank you for being in community with us today on this call. We love you all. We wish you the best. We make prayers, sincere prayers for sustained health of the fellow human beings, and healing prayers and aspirations for all of those, so many people suffering from this very powerful virus. Let's make those prayers together. Let's bring loving kindness and compassion to the fore. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Shabda. Thank you, Pir Shabda, Mirabai, Tommy. I always say it wrong, huh?
Mom.
Tamam. Got it. Thank you. You know, this unfortunately is going to conclude our collective day of provocative, beautiful conversations, spiritual exploration. I hope you all out there really enjoyed it. And I don't know how to thank our three guests really enough for joining us. It was an honor. It was a joy to be with you both and at home, all of you who are watching. If you've subscribed already to SunSeed, the mailing list, please, we'll be sending you a personal invitation to our next SunSeed Wisdom Talk, Wisdom Talk 2. And if you haven't yet subscribed, really now's the time to do it. Everyone, please write this down. Wisdom Talk 2 will be on Saturday, June 27th. And we have one of the most inspiring speakers you will ever hope to hear maybe in your whole life. He's head of the Global Security Institute for Disarmament. He's a Sufi teacher. He's a colleague of Jane Goodall, an advisor to the United Nations. His name is Jonathan Granoff. In fact, Shabda, you know him very well. You introduced me to him, and you spent a lot of time with him. Could you just tell us briefly why we don't want to miss this incredible moment with him? And by the way, there will be another incredible woman leader with Jonathan, but I leave that as a special surprise for later.
Yeah. How wonderful to get a chance to listen to Jonathan Granoff. He's one of our closest friends, both of us, and we've had a friendship for probably 30 years. You know, what you hadn't said about him is, as a young man, he's a disciple of a great Sufi master named Guru Bawa Muhayyiddin, or, you know, as we called him, Guru Bawa. And he gave the name Jonathan's name Ahmed. His name is Ahmed Muhayyiddin. That's his Sufi name. So he's a great hidden Sufi master. He has a heart of gold. He has the gift of being able to speak what's in the space in such a beautiful way, to bring you to tears and to speak it in the moment and to be precise and concise. And he's a lover of love. He has a great sense of humor. He has a beautiful wife who's also one of our closest friends, Moon Granoff, and his mother, Kitty Kalman, was one of the great torch singers of all time, and so he grew up with music. He's a great, wonderful mystic of the day, and he's in there in the good fight, if you want to call it that. He's the head of the Global Security Institute to end the world of nuclear weaponry. He's been dedicated to that. He's been the head of that for 15 years. It was handed to him by the two people who started, Mikhail Gorbachev, former premier of Russia, and Alan Cranston, Senator Alan Cranston from California. And he's everywhere. And we've traveled. We've camped in the snow in Greenland together. We've been in Assisi together. We've been in India together. We've been in Morocco together. We've been in so many places. He's such a wonderful voice for sanity and for humanity. So I encourage you all to make time and be with him. And I certainly want to learn every minute I can. I want to learn from him and take teachings from him.
Every time I hear him, my mouth goes open, and tonight my heart got open because of your beautiful sharing, Mirabai and Pir Shabda and Mom, your beautiful voice. Thank you both. Thank you all for listening. It's been a memorable time, and it's auspicious because this is the last day of Ramadan. Yes, at least here in Malaysia. I'm in Malaysia at the moment. We just had our last break fast meal today, and now tomorrow it's feasting time for the next month. For all of you, may you all be blessed. Shabbat Shalom, Namaste. Assalamu alaikum.
Ramadan
For the work. What'd you say?
Ramadan Mubarak.
Ramadan.
Mubarak, absolutely. And good morning or good evening, wherever you are. See you the next time for SunSeed Wisdom Talks.